Imagine a football club so desperate for stadium expansion that they're willing to fight a supermarket chain, force families from their homes, and gamble 3 times their original budget on a single building project. Now imagine that same club almost went bankrupt and was saved literally hours before complete extinction. This is the insane true story of Crystal Palace, a club that started with a £75 million dream and turned it into a £200 million nightmare that could either save them or destroy everything they built. But here's the part that'll blow your mind. Their current stadium was so outdated that it was rejected for the 1966 World Cup. And one of their key financial backers, they now own part of their London rivals. We're talking about a project so controversial that it involves compulsory purchase orders, expired planning permissions, and a grocery store holding an entire football club hostage. Stick around because this story is full of surprises and it's not over yet. But first, let's go back to where this madness all began. So why exactly is Crystal Palace desperately trying to expand Selhurst Park? The answer lies in survival, both financial and emotional, but the story goes back much further than you'd think. Here's the incredible backstory. Crystal Palace literally came hours away from extinction in 2010. Steve Parish led a last-minute consortium that saved the club from liquidation, and that near-death experience shaped everything that followed. Parish understood that Premier League survival meant modern facilities, and he'd learned the hard way what happens when clubs ignore infrastructure. But the stadium problems go back even further. Selhurst Park opened in 1924, designed by legendary architect Archibald Leitch. Here's the crazy part. The main stand was actually left unfinished due to industrial action, and it's remained essentially the same ever since. We're talking about facilities that were incomplete 100 years ago, still hosting Premier League football today. The expansion dream isn't even new. Palace first applied for planning approval for upgrades back in 2011, then shelved it. This has been brewing for over a decade, and here's the historical irony that stings. Selhurst Park was rejected as a 1966 World Cup venue due to poor facilities. That rejection has remained in club lore for nearly 60 years. Crystal Palace's current capacity is just 25,486, one of the smallest in the Premier League. That's less than half Arsenal's Emirates and smaller than many championship clubs. Every match day since 2013, when they returned to the Premier League, Palace have been leaving millions on the table. The club's analysis showed brutal reality. Without expansion, they'd never compete financially with Premier League powerhouses. While Tottenham built billion-pound stadiums and rivals expanded commercial offerings, Palace were stuck with a century-old ground that, while atmospheric, was completely inadequate for modern football economics. Parish knew the location in South London made relocation impossible. Selhurst Park wasn't just their home since 1924, it was their identity. The only way forward was up, but the path there would prove more treacherous than anyone imagined. When Crystal Palace unveiled their expansion plans in 2017, the design was genuinely breathtaking. The architectural firm KSS Design Group, the same company behind Liverpool's recent Anfield renovations, created something that was both futuristic and deeply respectful of the club's heritage. The centerpiece is a complete reconstruction of the main stand. We're talking about demolishing a structure that's been there since 1924 and replacing it with a 5-story architectural masterpiece. The new stand features a stunning all-glass front facade with a central vaulted arch, a direct tribute to the original Crystal Palace building that once stood on Sydenham Hill and gave the club its name. This isn't just about looking pretty though. The capacity increase is massive. The current main stand holds just 5,200 supporters. The new structure will accommodate 13,500 fans. That's more than doubling the capacity of their most important stand. When completed, total stadium capacity will jump from around 26,000 to over 34,000. But here's where it gets really interesting. The features planned for this new stand are genuinely world-class. We're talking about state-of-the-art corporate facilities, a club museum that will showcase Crystal Palace's rich 160-year history, a new club shop, restaurants, and improved accessibility features for disabled supporters. The sustainability aspect is particularly impressive. The new building is designed to achieve net net zero carbon in operation, putting Crystal Palace ahead of many Premier League rivals in environmental responsibility. One of the most ingenious aspects of the design is how they plan to build it. The original concept was to construct a new stand around the existing structure, meaning Palace could continue playing at Selhurst Park throughout the entire construction process. This would maintain that incredible atmosphere that makes Selhurst Park special while avoiding the revenue loss of playing away from home. However, and this is where things get controversial, Palace are now considering a different approach. They might completely vacate the main stand during construction, which would speed up the project but temporarily reduce capacity and cost the club millions in lost ticket revenue. The visual impact of this new stand cannot be overstated. The all-glass facade will be visible for miles around South London, essentially creating a new landmark for the area. The central arch design pays homage to the original Crystal Palace, while looking firmly toward the future. Inside, the design includes multiple levels of hospitality, modern broadcast facilities that meet current Premier League standards, and community spaces that can be used year-round, not just on match days. KSS Design Group didn't just create a football stand. They designed what they called a stadium the whole of South London can be proud of. And looking at the renderings, it's hard to disagree, but creating beautiful designs is one thing, actually building them, that's where Crystal Palace's problems really began. If you thought the design phase was complicated, wait until you hear about the construction controversies that have plagued this project for almost 8 years. And it all started with a supermarket. Yes, Sainsbury's, a grocery store that almost derailed the entire project. Back in 1981, when Palace were struggling financially, they sold part of their land to Sainsbury's for £2 million. The supermarket built their store literally into part of the stadium structure, with executive boxes actually built on top of the Sainsbury's roof. It's one of the most unusual arrangements in world football. For the expansion to work, Palace needed a small section of Sainsbury's car park. We're talking about what The Guardian described as a tiny sliver of land. But Sainsbury's played absolute hardball, demanding what they called a commercial price for the land. The negotiations dragged on for years. Palace chairman Steve Parish famously said he couldn't imagine Sainsbury's wanting to be the people who hold up the development of a new, iconic venue for South London. But that's exactly what happened. The situation became so ridiculous that Croydon Council considered using compulsory purchase orders to force Sainsbury's to sell. Finally, in December 2022, 5 years after the project was announced, an agreement was reached. The cost? Several £1 million for a tiny piece of car park. But that was just the beginning. The expansion required Crystal Palace to acquire 6 homes on Wooderson Close, a residential street right behind the main stand. 5 were council-owned, 1 was private, and that one house brought the entire project to a standstill. Palace weren't just buying their homes, but also provide replacement housing, moving costs, and compensation of at least £6,000 per family. The club also had to fund the construction of equivalent 4-bedroom houses elsewhere in the area. But the private homeowner refused to sell, forcing Palace to pursue a compulsory purchase order through the courts. This legal process has added years to the timeline and millions to the costs. Then came COVID-19. The pandemic hit just as Palace were making real progress on the preparatory work. Construction costs skyrocketed, supply chains collapsed, and the financial uncertainty nearly killed the project entirely. But perhaps the most frustrating controversy was bureaucratic. Palace's original planning permission, granted in April 2018, actually expired during the delays. The club had to go through the entire approval process again in 2022, adding more time and more costs to an already bloated project. The cost increases have been staggering. The project started with a budget of £75 million in 2017. By 2022, that had risen to £150 million. Today, estimates suggest the final cost will exceed £200 million, nearly triple the original budget. Some fans and local residents have questioned whether Palace have bitten off more than they can chew. The club's revenue in 2023 was around £180 million, meaning they're essentially betting their entire annual income on this single project. Construction is finally set to begin at the end of the 2024 to 2025 season, but many fans are asking, is this the bold leap Crystal Palace needs to compete, or a financial gamble they simply can't afford to lose? The funding model for this expansion reveals just how precarious Crystal Palace's position really is. This isn't being funded by some billionaire owner or a massive commercial deal. It's essentially a group of businessmen gambling their own money on the future of a football club. The primary funding is coming from Palace's four major shareholders: Chairman Steve Parrish, John Textor, who also owns Lion, Josh Harris, Philadelphia 76ers owner, and David Blitzer, who has stakes in multiple sports franchises. These four men are personally providing the loans needed to complete the project. Parrish has made the ultimate sacrifice for this project. He was offered a £1.7 million bonus, which he refused to take. Instead, he loaned that money back to the club to help fund the expansion. That's the level of commitment driving this project. But here's where things get risky. Palace still need to raise an additional £45 million, primarily from these same four shareholders. If even one of them backs out, or if their other ventures take a financial hit, the entire project could collapse midstream. The financial projections show that the expanded stadium should generate an additional £20 to £30 million per year in revenue. Sounds great, but that means the break-even point is approximately 10 years away. That's a decade where Palace need to remain in the Premier League, maintain their supporter base, and avoid any major financial disasters. The construction timeline is equally precarious. Work should begin in summer 2025 and take approximately 2.5 years to complete. That means Palace won't see the full benefits until the 2027-28 season at the earliest. In Premier League terms, that's an eternity. There's also the question of what happens if Palace get relegated during construction. Championship clubs don't generate anywhere near the revenue needed to service £200 million worth of debt. Relegation during this project could genuinely threaten the club's existence. But if it works, Crystal Palace will have one of the most impressive stadiums in London, a revenue stream that puts them on par with established Premier League clubs, and a home that matches their ambitions. They'll have proven that a community-owned club can compete with nation-state funding and billionaire owners through smart investment and long-term planning. Looking at where we are today, construction is finally imminent. Palace have appointed Australian company Lendlease as their construction partner, the same firm behind major projects worldwide. All the land deals are completed, the residents have been relocated, and the planning permissions are in place. The question now isn't whether Crystal Palace can build their dream stadium, it's whether they can survive the process. This is a £200 million bet that will either secure their Premier League future or potentially destroy everything they've built over the past decade. What do you think? Is this expansion worth a massive financial risk, or should Palace have focused on other areas of investment? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Crystal Palace's stadium saga, make sure to like and subscribe for more incredible stories from the world of football.